There are things, a reality, as it really is. And then there's what we perceive to be reality. Two entirely different things. In other words, people have in their mind, there are certain beliefs, and these beliefs are usually based on what they want to be true. But what a person wants to be true is often quite different than what is true. And sooner or later, visualize these as two paths. One, the path of what you want to be true, and the other, the path of what is really true. And sooner or later, the twain shall meet. And when they meet, there's what is called the rude awakening. Has anyone here had a rude awakening before? Right. I've told the story several times about how I first heard myself sing on a tape recorder, and I was rudely awakened that I didn't have a professional sounding voice for it, and I was not going to be a rock star that I thought I might be. Because when I was a kid, a tape recorder was rare, you know. My dad had to go borrow one from a friend. That was a really rude awakening for me that was a good lesson for me, because it kind of kept me aware for the rest of my life, thinking, you know, this reality, what I perceive to be reality, may be different than what is reality. And so this is an important point. What we believe to be true is often just what we want to be true. Have you found that to be true? What you believe to be true is often what we want to be true. What we want to be true is often turns into what we believe to be true. But what really is true is often turns into a rude awakening. But then, when we are awakened, what happens? How is our perception of the truth changed after the awakening occurs? Do we begin to like the truth? I bet Blaine would be a good one to ask on this. You've had quite a journey through your life. Through your life, Blaine, once you perceived something, found out something was true, that maybe when you're younger you didn't think it was true. But once you finally embraced the truth, was it something you started to like after you embraced it?
Yeah, after I embraced it.
Yeah, right.
Usually, though, didn't like it when I found out.
Yeah, you don't like it when you find out. This often happens even in calamities. Maybe you're in love with a certain woman, the woman breaks it off with you, and you're heartbroken. You thought she loved you, but she says, I never really loved you, you've been like a brother, you know, type of thing. And so you're just really upset, you're devastated. But then, a little bit later, you meet somebody twice as good, twice as compatible. And you, on reflection, 10 years later, after you're happily married, you might be thinking, man, sure glad I didn't marry that first one. She was totally wrong for me. Our belief system was entirely different. What was I thinking? And so that rude awakening you had that she didn't really like you that much, you were like a brother, was really good on hindsight, once you see the whole picture. And this is the way it is. Truth, there's a scripture that says, truth cuts the wicked to the core. It's an interesting scripture. It cuts to the core people who are not prepared for the truth, because we have our mindset as to what should be true. And the mindset goes along with our desires. And what produces pain? Pain is produced by frustrated desire. This is one thing the Buddha taught, was in order to avoid pain, in order to free ourselves from pain, is to free ourselves from attachment to desire. He says if we can do this, then we can free ourselves from pain. And nothing produces pain more than having a desire for something to be true, and then having that desire shattered. It's interesting, Blaine, several here mentioned early Mormon connections, and several of us were Mormons at one time. And Joseph Smith made this interesting remark about beliefs and truth. As you know, in the early Mormon church, they went through a lot of persecutions. They were persecuted from city to city. The leaders were tarred and feathered. Joseph Smith and the leadership of the church was put in jail. Joseph Smith was kidnapped. Many of the leaders had their children killed and raped and their wives raped. They went through all kinds of things, and no matter what they went through, it didn't seem to faze them. And Joseph made this very interesting comment. He talked about all the persecutions they went through, and it didn't seem to faze them. He says, but when I present a truth to them that they're not prepared to accept, that goes against their grain, he says, they will shatter like glass. So that's interesting. They go through all these persecutions, their wives are raped, their children killed, they're drugged through the streets, and they just get stronger and stronger, and they say, boy, we're not going to take this. We're going to take whatever God dishes out. And then you present them with an interesting truth. Like he presented the idea that man and God are one, that man can actually become as God is. And that shattered a lot of people like glass. That really, really upset a lot of people because that was so contrary to what they had been taught. It's very, very close to what the New Age philosophy and the ancient wisdom teaches, was what he began to teach about God and man. That man was more than just a man, but man was a God in embryo. And when he started teaching this, he says, boy, they shatter like glass. They will go through all of this persecution, all of this pain, and they will stand no matter what happens, no matter how much you shove them around. But present them just one thing contrary to what they want to believe. They will shatter like glass. And people haven't changed that much, have they? People will still shatter like glass. It's interesting, the last political election, people were divided on two camps. And one camp believed very strongly their beliefs, and the other camp believed very strongly on their beliefs. And of course, out of these two camps, one of them had to win. It's interesting that the nation was so polarized between the Democrats and Republicans that when there was a winner, and it could have happened the other way around, but when there was a winner, many Democrats had to take counseling to ease their pain over the election of George Bush. So they had, I heard on different talk shows how they had a lot of psychologists were giving out free treatments to people, and then there's another story about a guy who went to the White House, and outside the White House shot himself, and another guy went to, I think, Empire State Building and jumped off. But this last election was so polarized that whoever was going to lose it was going to be really, really upset, because both sides and the political system today are very attached to their belief system. Both sides are. And of course, both sides have flaws in their belief systems. And if you're in a room with either side talking about their belief system, and you point out one of the flaws in it, you'll find that they will shatter like glass. They will think you're the enemy. Let me, I'll give you an example on both sides, and some people here may shatter like glass because I'm going to give an example on both sides. Let's talk about the abortion side. So let's suppose you're talking to a bunch of conservatives, and they all voted for Bush, and they're all gung-ho about the conservative cause, and you mentioned, well, did you know there's nowhere in the Bible tells you it's wrong to have an abortion? No go. Their minds will go, does not compute, like Verger on Star Trek. Remember that Jim hit him with some logic, this flawed machine, and it started smoking and blew up because it couldn't handle the logic there. So if you point out to somebody on the right, well, it doesn't say anywhere in the Bible anywhere about abortion or when life begins or anything. Have you got some revelation from God on it or something? Why do you think you're right on this? And they will look on you like you're the worst enemy on the face of the earth. You're shattering their belief system. On the other hand, let's suppose you're with somebody on the right that these guys all voted for John Kerry. And you say, well, there's no real evidence of global warming. All the evidence I have is pretty much fabricated. And I'll go, wow. Where do you come from? Were you some Bush zealot? So they will go on and almost attack you and ready to devour you before you leave the room. So it's interesting that both sides, if you hit them with something contrary to their belief system, and probably I've hit both sides right here, contrary to your belief systems, because there's probably conservatives and liberals here. So hopefully nobody here shatters like glass. I think we've got a little bit more malleable group here than you would normally have. But this is an interesting thing about truth. There is truth that is perceived because this is what we want, and then there's the truth. There's the way things really are. Now, a lot of people try to confuse the system because they say, well, that's your truth, and I have my truth. Okay, so you think 2 plus 2 is 5, and I think 2 plus 2 is 4, and your truth is 2 plus 2 is 5. Because that's your truth, does that make it the truth? Or perhaps I think 2 plus 2 is 6, he thinks 2 plus 2 is 5. Both of us are wrong, and we both need an awakening to what reality is. There's reality, and then there's illusion. It's like in the days of Columbus, many people thought the earth was flat. Because they thought it was flat and it was their truth. Was it really their truth? No, it was their illusion, not their truth. There's your illusion, and then there's truth. The Course in Miracles makes an interesting statement. And I've talked to very few people who believe the Course in Miracles who believes what the Course in Miracles says. And it says this about truth. The truth is true, and nothing else is true. I think on that. The truth is true, and nothing else is true. 2 plus 2 equals 4, and nothing else in the whole universe adds up to 4 except for, well, let me put it this way. 3 plus 1 equals 4, right? But 2 plus 2 equals 4, and 2 plus 2 doesn't equal anything but 4. No matter how many times you try to add it up, 2 plus 2 will equal 4. Now, one side will think, well, that's being narrow-minded. If you're open-minded, you've got to be open to the fact that it could be 5. Okay, I'm open to the fact that it could be 5. But whatever it is, the truth is true, and nothing else is true. I'm here at this spot right now, this point in time and space. The time is what, the date is January 16th, 2005, 8:35. In our reality here, it's a certain time, we're in a certain space, and that's what it is. People say, well, gosh, we could just all be dreaming. Maybe we're not really here. Well, even when you're dreaming, a dream is still truth. If you dream you're being chased by a monster, it's still true that you were dreaming that you were being chased by a monster. It's still true that you went through that experience. So whatever experience you're going through is true and nothing else is true. We are all going through this experience together, and we can philosophize about what's going on around us, what's causing the experience, if it's a dream, if it's all the atoms coming together, if it's a mind of God making it happen, or whatever is causing it. Whatever's causing it, that's what it is. We may not know all the facts. But when we find out the truth is true and nothing else is true. We're going through this experience right now, all of us together in this room, having an experience together, and this is what is true at this moment in time and space. And so this is an important thing to realize is there is truth. There's not your truth and my truth, but the truth. What your truth is what you perceive to be true because you want it to be true. What my truth is what I perceive to be true because I want it to be true, but then there is the truth. When we find the truth, it does something a little bit different. When we are attached to a truth and we believe it to be truth, it doesn't produce joy. When we find what true reality is, it produces joy and happiness. That's the difference between the two. And you watch people that are in illusion, like I like watching these debate shows on TV where they're really arguing on different points. And I notice the guy that seems to be the farthest off the mark is always the most unhappy of the two. He's shouting the loudest, he's getting the most emotional. In other words, this guy is in great illusion. The greater the illusion the guy seems to be in, the more unhappy he seems to be. His truth isn't making him very happy because he's in illusion. But the guy who seems closer to the truth, from my point of view anyway, he seems a lot more stable, he's not nearly as ruffled. He may be passionate, but he doesn't seem unhappy with his belief system. And this is what I've found as I've had greater and greater truths dawn upon me. I've had greater peace, I've had greater joyousness, greater happiness, greater contentment, greater ability to accept what is. That's a really important thing, just to accept what is that I have found that the people who are most miserable, and that's at least half of humanity, or half of humanity are pretty unhappy with everything, aren't they? And when you talk to somebody that's grumbling about what they're unhappy about, it's usually just because they can't accept what is. Well, so-and-so, they just really irritate the dickens out of me. Well, I say, well, why don't you just accept them for what they are? Can't accept them. Well, why not? Because they irritate me. Well, why do they irritate you? It's because you can't accept them. Okay, we'll just accept the way they are, look through their personality, and look upon their soul and accept them for what they are. They did an interesting study on surveys. I think the Gallup organization did, or somebody. They prepared these questions. Matter of fact, it was a study to try to get accurate surveys. So they did this study to find out how accurate their surveys were. And they prepared this line of questions, and they trained two groups of people to go out and ask the questions, all with a straight face, all with no bias, but just read off the questions and write the answers down. They only did one thing different between the two groups. The first group, they said, now according to our studies, 70% of the people will agree with such and such, with the conclusions of the survey. Then they told the other group only 70% of the people will disagree with the survey. And they sent these two groups out to take the surveys. Guess what the response was they got back?
Just what they expected.
Right. The people that had the survey, and they were trained to have, stone faces that didn't show any bias, just ask the questions. Yet the ones that were told to expect 70% to agree got exactly 70% to agree. The others had 70% disagree. It was amazing. Amazing thing. Why was that? They were trained to do everything exactly the same way, but they got diametrically opposite results. What produced opposite results? They both had the same training. They only had one thing different. One group was told to expect one thing. The other group was told to expect something else.
Expectation? Was it their expectation? Was it not?
Yeah. But the expectation, there had to be more than expectation, though. Expectation was the key.
More than meets the eye than the assessment.
Right. The expectation produced subtle differences in the way they ask the questions. They give subtle little hints to the people about how they were supposed to respond. It's about like the news people. The news people, they all say they're not biased at all, but they can manipulate what we think of the news by what they select for us to hear. Say there's 5 news stories. 4 of them are, say, negative about a certain politician. One is positive, but they like this politician, so they only go with the positive story about the politician, and they do this every day. Eliminate the 4 negative, pick the 1 positive. What's the public going to think after a while about this politician? Think, well, this politician's a pretty good guy. He's doing everything right. And so he gets good accolades by all the public because the public isn't aware of all the negative things happen. Maybe he's having an affair that they're not reporting or something like that. So what we expect will often be what we bring to ourselves as our truth. It won't be the truth, but it will be our truth. Now, probably both of those survey results were incorrect, what they took, because it was an experiment. Probably the answer was somewhere closer to the middle. But these people were expecting certain results, and that's what they got. So it's fascinating when you think about that. This is the way it is with truth. We think a certain thing is going to be true, and because we think a certain thing is going to be true, we keep finding evidence of it. And we keep finding evidence of it, and we confirm it again and again and again. Let's take the prophecies of Nostradamus. You ever notice that after some big event happens, like 9/11 or assassination of Kennedy or whatever, they dig up Nostradamus and they say, oh, Nostradamus predicted this. Well, if he predicted it, why didn't you see it before it happened? Oh, I just didn't see it for some reason. Well, it's because he wasn't looking for it. But after it happened, he looks for it, then he finds it. Now, in what we call the rags, like the Inquirer and those type of magazines, as I'm checking out, whenever it talks about prophecies of the future, I always read them as I'm waiting in line. And I don't know how many times I've seen some headline, Nostradamus predicts end of world or whatever. And I read about Nostradamus' prediction, and they said, Nostradamus clearly predicted economic depression, end of the world, assassination of the president or something like this. It's going to happen a certain time, and they got all the details. And then I wait a few months, and nothing happens the way it was predicted. So far, every Nostradamus prediction that they have concocted, that they have looked for in the future, not one single one has come true. Not one single one. But the fact is, getting back to the point, that we find what we're looking for. So the question that needs to dawn on us is this. If by searching for truth, by looking for what you want to be true, doesn't work, then how do we go about searching for truth? How do we find what is really true? The trouble with finding the truth, if you desire the truth strong enough, and then you find something that confirms it even though it's wrong, you'll still feel pretty good. Right. Blaine was smiling. I bet when you were in the Mormon church you had that happen several times, right? You found several things you're excited about then, but now on hindsight, doesn't look quite so right? All right, Blaine's agreeing with me for the sake of the recording here. Yeah, if anyone wants to talk longer than a few seconds, come up and grab the mic from me. So the question arises, well, how do we find out what is really true? It all boils down to escaping illusion. Because illusion is caused by wrong programming in our mind from the beginning. But before we can even get to correcting that programming, we have to master our desires. And this is why you read in the scriptures and in many sacred works about the prophets being tested one way or another, because we all have to undergo a series of tests from our souls to prove to our higher self that we put truth above what we want, what we desire. I remember before I was married, when I was a young guy going to college, I come across this gal who I really fell head over heels for. And I really wanted her to be the one. And as we seemed to get closer, one day, I didn't even pray or anything about it, but one day a strong spiritual feeling just hit me really strongly that I wasn't supposed to marry her. I just felt a really negative feeling, and then it was gone. And I thought, well, that's a heck of a thing, because I really like this gal. And so I tried to kind of put that out of my mind, because I really wanted it to be true that she would eventually be my wife. And as I really wanted it to be true, I started feeling warmer and warmer and warmer, and after a while I thought, well, maybe that was my imagination. And then all of a sudden it hit me for the second time, and I thought, oh, darn. And then I put that in the back of my mind, and I started feeling warmer and warmer and warmer toward her, and I was thinking, maybe that was kind of an anomaly. Maybe this feeling I have right now is it. And then I believe, if I remember right, it happened a third time, and I still was trying to ignore it because I really liked her. I really wanted it to be true that she would be the one for me. And then I had a date with her, and she had a really somber look on her face when we got together. She says, you know what happened to me? I said, what? I said, I prayed about you last night, whether or not, you were the one for me, and God told me that you weren't. I thought, well, it didn't work very good, God telling me, so I had to tell her. And I says, well, I guess you're right, really, because I've got the same message. I've just been trying to ignore it because I didn't want it to be true. And on hindsight, she was definitely the wrong choice for me. It would have been totally wrong for me to have married her at the time. But there I learned an important lesson, that to find the truth is often not what you want. And that was reinforced to me over the next, 5 or 6 years. I had a number of experiences that were very painful to me, much more painful than that, drilling into my heart and soul that the truth is often not what I want. But when the truth is revealed and I finally accept it, it will produce much joy, much more joy than you ever dreamed of. So the important lesson, if I could leave any lesson with the group today, it would be this, is never be afraid of what is true, because the truth will set you free, as Jesus said. And when the truth sets you free, you are free indeed. You're free to do what? You're free to pursue the true path to reality. Because until the truth sets us free, we are on a path in illusion. We are just the dreamer in the dream that cannot wake up from the dream. But when the truth sets us free, then we are awakened. And it's interesting how when truth sinks into people, it's often associated with the word awakening. Like rude awakening is one word that is associated with when truth dawns on some people, or just awakening, or I woke to what was real, or she woke me up by what she said, or something like this. So the first step is to overcome our attachment to what we believe. The way I look at it now is I'm happy with what I believe right now, but if I find out that everything is not correct, and I've got a lot of things upside down, because I've learned this one lesson, that when you do embrace truth, and reality as it is, it's going to increase your consciousness, increase your sensitivity to good feelings, to joy, and to happiness. Well, there's nothing to fear. I was thinking, well, what truth could I find out that would make me unhappy? Well, the only truth I could think of was if I found out that when we died, that was just it. That wouldn't be very... I guess I'd just eat, drink, and be merry and party every day then. But that's about the only thing I could think of that would really upset me, and even that, there would be some divine thing in if it were true. But fortunately, that is not the case. We are eternal beings, and we will continue to exist as entities in one form or another for all eternity, and that's a great belief to have. But that's, like I say, that's the only belief I can think of. That I've had so many belief systems in my life shattered already that a few more would be just kind of fun now. But the first few times my belief systems were shattered was quite painful. So the first step is overcome desire, and the second step is self-examination. Overcoming desire is a really tough one. And what this takes is some painful experiences. This is what it took for me. Painful experiences. And it's very painful when you're attached to truth to have that truth shattered and replaced with another truth. And sometimes when this happens to people, they're devastated for the rest of their lives. Like, for instance, going through a divorce, some people go through a divorce and they pine over that person for the rest of their life. They're never happy one more day. Or they lose that job, or they discover something that wasn't true that they thought was true. But something that they're attached to shatters. It sometimes will cripple a person for his entire life. So he's just miserable for the rest of his life. And other people accept it, go through the pain, move on to greater things, have some more pain, then they move on, and eventually you'll reach a point to where nothing can bring you pain anymore. You can have your belief system completely shattered, and you'll think, well, this just means it's going to be replaced by something better. So you're not in a state of pain anymore about it.
Thanks for listening to the New Age Christian Synthesis podcast. If what you heard rang true for you, or you're interested in finding out more about what J.J. Dewey teaches, please visit his website at freeread.com.